Okay. A little water real quick. Sorry.
You're talking a lot, right? Perfect.
All right. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of There is a Solution for That. And, we've talked about a lot of different topics over the last year. And we've got another good one for you today. Every business has challenges with people, right? Every business has challenges with HR and management and compliance and all this other stuff. And so we've got a great guest on our show to talk about HR compliance and how to ensure compliance without getting sued, which is always everybody's very interested in not getting sued. So, but we'll also talk about the positive side of it as well. So Sandra Asher from who's the founder of HRCC Services is here to join us. So welcome to the show, Sandra.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background about myself, I got my bachelor's degree in human resource management many years ago. I've been in HR for over a decade. Started out as an HR assistant, quickly worked my way through management. Then I was a HR director for about 6, 7 years. My industry primarily has been hospitality, health and wellness. However, HR employment laws apply to all industries. It doesn't matter which industry you're in, they are there for everybody, right? After working in HR for so many years, I did realize that my favorite part of it was ensuring compliance with employment laws for these employers I was working for. So that's kind of what inspired me to branch out and start my own company, HRCC Services.
That's fantastic. Well, I think people with you like you with the experience and background that you have, it is an undervalued thing, I think, in a lot of businesses because at least from my experience, people don't think about compliance. People don't think about compliance until it's a little bit too late, and now they've got an issue that they're trying to get in front of. But usually at that time, it's really really hard, and they wish they could rewind the clock and hire someone like you to make sure they don't have a compliance issue. So I appreciate you being on the show. So just to kind of get us started, sort of define terms here. Like in your mind, what is HR compliance all about?
Yeah, HR compliance is really about protecting both the business and the employees. So that's making sure that your job description, handbooks, policies, procedure, HR documentations are all compliant with employment laws that are either federal, state, or local. So in short, it's really just making sure that you're legally protected by making sure that you're staying up to date with these ever evolving and changing laws.
Okay, and I've got to imagine, especially when you kind of like mentioned job descriptions, you mentioned kind of like things like handbooks, policies, procedures, things like that. I've got to imagine there's a whole range of topics that are in the legal compliance area, but then there's probably a whole lot of them that are just sort of in the um, generally good things to do, best practices, um, maybe not legally required, but still things that companies might consider doing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when it comes to hiring, I always tell people the best practice is definitely consistency. So for every job position you have open, you should have a certain set of questions for each position, and it does comply with equal employment opportunity guidelines. So I mean, it's always with the employment law, but you're also making sure that it's a fair and ethical hiring practice for everybody, and makes it fair for everyone that is applying and interviewing for those positions. Never make a decision until you've interviewed everybody that you've scheduled for those interviews. Again, because if you pick somebody, that's not fair to other people that haven't even had a chance to step foot in front of you. Um, Definitely don't ask about age, race, religion, things like that. Those are always a big no-no. And then I always tell people, like, we look for people based on their skills, qualifications to fill a role, right? That's the primary thing. But I always recommend looking at people's personality and characteristics, because 90% of the time, skills can be trained, right? But personality and characteristics can't. And you want to make sure that that individual is also going to mesh within your culture. And that's how we hire those qualified candidates.
Okay, good stuff. And I'm going to play the role for a second, of someone who has no clue about HR stuff at all.
Sure.
Um, I'm going to play the role of someone who probably would make a whole lot of mistakes without somebody like you sitting next to me, giving me advice. But I think one of the hardest things when hiring and interviewing people is you do interview somebody and you like get along with them and you're like, oh my gosh, this person is so like me, or this person is so relatable or conversational or whatever. Maybe has nothing to do with their skills. It's just like, hey, this feels like a good fit. And I think a lot of people make decisions based on, does this feel like a good fit? So how do you balance um, the we want to get the best candidate in terms of capabilities and competence and ability to do the job versus maybe I've got someone that is the best candidate in those terms, but from a fit personality, are they going to be are they going to jive with our team? Maybe they aren't the best fit. So how do you balance that while still being in compliance?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how you balance that is, you could, people's personalities might mesh together instantly, right? And you're like, oh, I really like that person. I could see myself hanging out with that person outside of work. Well, that's not what we're here for. We're here to hire the person who's going to get the job done in the most efficient and effective way. So just definitely making sure that you are reviewing their skills and qualifications for those roles, and then also keeping that personality and characteristic trait in mind. But don't hire based on your connection. You need to hire based on what's best for the business needs at that time, not personal. So keep it personal and professional separate.
Okay, but is it okay to hire someone who may not be the most qualified, but you feel like will stick around longer because there will be maybe more of a culture fit?
Absolutely. With the culture fit, you definitely want to hire those individuals that will be a good culture fit. Because again, like I said, skills can always be taught, right? But personality and character can't. So if
Okay.
you feel that's going to be a good culture fit and that they're going to be somebody that you can, mentor, train, and coach up, then absolutely take that chance on that individual.
Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. Well, and so tell us a little bit more about the role that the job descriptions play, because I know that's an important thing, and I think some people do it. And of course, these days, there's probably more and more companies that are like, "Ooh, let me just chat GPT it, and come up with a job description." What are your thoughts and suggestions around job descriptions?
Yeah, job descriptions, you definitely need to put in the work with those. We need to make sure that they're clear and up to date. I definitely recommend employers reviewing those at least every 6 months, at minimum once a year, because over time, positions evolve, right? So if you're posting a job description that's 5, 6 years old, or you chat GPT'd and just posted it, okay, so now someone's reviewing this job description, expecting to come into your company, and these are the tasks and duties that they're going to be performing, and then it's completely something different, right? So there's gonna be confusion, animosity, and 90% of the time the person's probably gonna quit because they're gonna be like, that's not what I signed up for. So they are very, very
Mm.
important. You also want to make sure that you use gender neutral language. Don't ever put he or she. That can get you in the hot seat, right? With the
Okay.
OC. And then, even though Texas doesn't require the Pay Transparency Act and law, a lot of states are following suit with that. And I highly recommend it. And what it is you're posting the salary you're going to be paying this position, like minimum to max. I recommend it even though Texas doesn't require it, because you're weeding out individuals that aren't even in your price range. So you're not calling or pre-screening these individuals who aren't even in your price range. And then you get to that, hey, what are your salary expectation question? And they're way over what you're willing to pay, or somebody that's way under. So it's weeding out those additional people. So I definitely recommend following suit and posting those that pay.
Okay, that's good. And not to be cute, but I mean it's easier said than done on some of that stuff, because I know that like we've done job listings in the past and tried to do that, right? We've put in
Yeah.
salary ranges, we put in things like, hey, this is not a remote position, whatever, and go through multiple rounds of interviews, and then we get to the offer stage and they're like, yeah, I was wondering, could I work remotely? And it's like, did we not have that conversation at the very beginning of this process? Or yeah, I was kind of hoping for 100,000. It's like, wait a second, did we not talk about that? So I think certainly best practice. But I think maybe from my experience, the biggest challenge is getting people to read that, pay attention to that, understand that, acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think some people will go through the motions knowing probably that there may be an issue with this or that, but they want to keep in the process, right? They don't want to get, ruled out at the beginning, because, hey, get to know somebody and you might offer them more, who knows? But yeah, anyways, I've seen challenges on both sides of that. So let's assume you've gone through the hiring process. You've now made somebody an offer and they're about to come on board. Have there been any changes with like employment verification, like the I-9 stuff? Is any of that stuff evolved over the last 5, 10 years?
The I-9 form was updated again earlier this year, and then last year they keep updating it and things like that. The I-9 is a government form to verify that people are authorized to work within the United States. The most common form of identification that employees do bring in once they are, hired, is like driver's license, state ID, school ID. The other most common is like a birth certificate or social security card. And then they could have a US passport, make sure all documents are always valid, not expired. And then you also have individuals that'll have a permanent residency card that is acceptable for work authorization. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting that completed within 72 hours of hire, because every error you have on an I-9 could cost you anywhere from $200 to $2,000 and up per error on every I-9 that you do have. So
Yeah.
using the E-Verify platform, the state of Texas does not require you to use it. However, it is a government database that you could enter, and it's free. So you could enter whatever documentation these individuals are bringing you to verify against the government database that they are valid documentations. And that helps keep you out of the hot seat as well.
Interesting. Okay, so E-Verify, very cool. By the way, I hope I'm not making this up, but it's a question that I've heard somebody ask related to this. So like when you're hiring somebody and you're asking them for employment verification, driver's license, social security, is there some rule about like you can or can't make copies of that stuff? Is that ring a bell at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically it's either a yes or a no. So if you do it for one employee on that I-9, every I-9 moving forward, you have to make copies of those IDs and then keep it with it or upload it into the E-Verify platform. Um, and then if you don't do it, then obviously if you don't do it, then don't just start doing it for one individual. Now, if it's someone who has work authorization documentations that has to be re-verified, because their card expired, their work authorization in the United States expires on a certain date, you definitely want to make sure you have copies of those documentations attached to it.
Okay,
That's
got
that's the one exception, you have to have those.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. Cool. So we're just lasering through a number of topics, which is fantastic. So I know another area that you're very familiar with is just like employee handbooks. What are some of the things that, again, things change over time, and also to the point you very made at the very beginning, there, depending on the different size of company, there might be additional, like if you're over 20 employees or 25 or 50, or I know there's certain thresholds where you have to start doing more things, which quite frankly is probably not on people's radars when it comes to things like handbooks. So tell us about some of the evolutions within the world of employee handbooks and maybe what people should be thinking about verifying or making sure they've added because of the recent changes.
Yeah, so we'll go over a couple of them. You got the Pump Act, PWFA, and then medical benefits. So let's start with the Pump Act. So the Pump Act is something you definitely want to make sure is in your employee handbook. It was implemented during the Biden administration, and that is also that it's providing nursing mothers a private space that's locked and other than a bathroom, so that they can express milk for their child. And then you also want to if you have a refrigerator in your break room, provide them like a little space where they can use a cooler bag. They don't just set it in there because that's unsanitary. If and then they should have access to a sink, and things like that. And then and that's 50 employees or more, you have to comply with that law. And then as for PWFA, which is the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, so that is from conception or knowledge of birth of a child, like pregnancy, and that you're going to be birthing a child, and then even into postpartum, that you have to provide reasonable accommodations for that individual. So if they have doctor's appointments that they can't schedule outside of regular business hours, you've got to accommodate them, let them go. If they are on their feet most of the day and they, need those 15, 20-minute breaks here and there, you need to accommodate those. So those are definitely some things that need to be in the employee handbook. That complies for 15 employees or more. I recommend following suit unless it causes undue hardship on you as an employer. I mean, those are little benefits you can offer to your employees, even if you had 10 of them, right? Everyone's got a mom, a sister, a grandma,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
sure you take care of people how you want to be treated and how you want your family to be treated. And then as for medical benefits, if you have 50 or more full-time employees, by law, you have to offer medical, dental, vision, and all of that. And a lot of employers don't realize that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the other one that,
Well, and there's a lot of choice in that area too.
yeah,
So even though, from my experience, it's all expensive.
it,
There's very few policies out there that are worth anything that don't cost a pretty good amount of money. But yeah, so it sounds like one of the biggest thresholds is 50
yeah.
employees.
Mhm.
A lot of stuff becomes a little bit more required than just a nice to have. So
Right.
so medical benefits you mentioned, and then the first one, just to spell it out, it was the pump. Like, is that PUMP?
Yes. Pump Act.
Pump
Yes.
Act. Okay, and some of that stuff, like you said, makes sense. I mean, even if it wasn't, a legally required thing or a compliance required thing, it just makes sense, right? I mean, I remember when my wife was pregnant with twins, and had complications near the end of it, and she was on bed rest for the last 2 months of her
Yeah.
pregnancy, and because that was literally doctor's orders.
Right.
You don't want these babies coming out prematurely. um, so things like that, where if, let's say, you're below the minimum employee threshold, it still is like, if you value this employee and you want them to stay with you and be part of the company long term, those are nice things to do. And it's also, just from a moral standpoint, it's like, look, you care about these people, hopefully. Take care of them, right?
Yes. 100%.
Very cool. So what about like some things more in the what I would call the technology space? Like, I've heard people talk about bring your own device policies. I've heard about, especially with the advent of AI and people that are using AI tools sort of on the job. Are there any things like that that need to be looked at or added to employee handbooks for any particular reason?
Yeah, so if you're allowing employees to bring their own devices to work on, you want to make sure you're at least installing that software and protection, VPNs and cybersecurity on their laptops. Because if they're just using personal, like you're exposing yourself, your company, your employees, and all their personal information to cybersecurity, right? So definitely, I discourage allowing personal laptops and things like that. As for AI, it is here to stay. I definitely recommend everybody getting used to it. It's
Yeah.
not where it does make life a lot easier, but don't rely on it 100% because it still makes errors and gives false information. So you need to do your due diligence if you are going to use it, and do your research and make sure that everything's accurate and correct.
Okay, so what about the AI, sort of, like, I don't know what you call it, AI use policy? Like, some companies are like, especially when it comes to sensitive um, services departments, HIPAA compliance, those types of things, where unless you've got the AI stuff locked down a certain way, you could be exposing private information online. And so, are there any things like that you're like, need to have a policy in place for?
When it comes to AI and that, everything should be internal. So that again, as long as you have your cybersecurity protection, VPNs, and all of that, etc., you should be protected for the most part. But that doesn't guarantee anything. You definitely want to have your rules around FMLA, ADA, HIPAA, OSHA within that. You know, and those are all just basic employment laws that everyone should be aware of and follow.
Okay, got it. So what other things, would you suggest? I mean, we talked about hiring, we talked about employment verification, we talked about handbooks. What other things that would you suggest to help employers protect themselves, but also sort of within the spirit of also protecting the employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely Fair Labor Standard Act, FLSA, that's in place with the federal government. You want to make sure that you're paying your employees fairly, so that'll help protect you and your employees. Because if you're not paying somebody overtime and they contact the Department of Labor and file a complaint against you, well, guess what? Now they're going to come in and do an internal audit, and they can go back years. And if you didn't pay people overtime, guess what? You're paying that overtime and then a bunch of fines and fees on top. Literally close you as a business. So
Hmm.
make sure that you're following the pay laws and everything because those can get tricky. You work with payroll and everything, so you know you know how all that works. Make sure that you're following fair hiring practices. Giving everybody that equal chance, and then equal pay for equal act, right? Or the Equal Pay Act, which is equal pay for equal work. So if you have two employees doing the same positions, hired around the same time, someone shouldn't be making $10,000 more than the other individual or vice versa, because that's pay discrepancy, which also opens the door for legal issues and morale. Like we can't ask an employee not to discuss their wages. How by law we can't. So that doesn't mean that they can't discuss their wages, and now someone's going to be upset because why is this person making so much more than me?
Right.
You got disgruntled employees, it ruins the morale, and then they could also file a claim with the Department of Labor. So those are
Right.
I recommend.
Well, and I guess that's also where some of the job description stuff comes into play, because if two people are doing roughly the same job, they in theory should have the same job description, and obviously they're doing the same work. But I know in smaller companies, especially where you've got people wearing multiple hats, even if they have the same basic job duties, there's probably variations. And if one person is getting paid more than the other, hopefully like you were saying, there should be a very good reason. Um, is that the kind of nuance that sometimes should be put into the job description so that there is a little bit more justification, like why this person is getting maybe paid a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're going to be doing like wearing 10 more hats than what the standard position is, they should have a completely different title. And that way it eliminates the confusion.
Yeah.
You could always develop a new position within your organization because that keeps that employee like, okay, I signed up for this job. That's not my job duties. They don't want to do it unless you're giving them more pay. But if you got two people, two same positions, you better develop a new job description because at that point you're going to have disgruntled employees, right? So it just keeps it fair,
Right.
open, and transparent for everybody.
Okay. And that last question and answer just kind of led me to another thought, which was like, I guess, whether people do annual raises or merit-based increases, just when somebody is exceeding expectations and it's like, look, I'm going to give this person a raise. Um, Seems to me, based on what you've said, is, if you're giving someone a raise, and maybe it's because they've taken on more responsibilities or they've been doing something that wasn't even in their job description, but it's adding value to the company. Maybe when you're doing pay reviews or what have you, maybe that's a good timing or time frame to review the job descriptions, make sure that it's up to date, that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could absolutely that way. I find it easier to just do it annually. So I have like a reminder in my calendar, like at beginning of mid June, early July, review those job descriptions, and then end of year, end of January, make sure you're reviewing them. But
Yeah.
again, it's a lot for small businesses. They don't have the time, right? So at least annually, make sure that you're pinging yourself, like put it on your to-do list, right? Or you hire someone like me who can handle that for you.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I was going to talk about that for a second because, if you're a big enough company, at some point you're going to hire an HR team. I mean, you're going to have, a director of HR or CHO or CHRO, whatever you call it. You might have, somebody that's specifically doing payroll and benefits. You might have somebody else. And so, when you get to a certain size, you probably do have the internal resources to do that. But but in that 1 to 50 employee range, then maybe they don't have someone that's thinking about this stuff all the time, making sure that everything's T's are crossed, I's are dotted, things like that. So what type of role do you play for those smaller companies that are like, I just want somebody to come in and make sure we're doing the right stuff, update the stuff that maybe we haven't touched in 20 years. Like, what do you do in those kind of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So an internal audit is kind of like an internal checkup of what's going on within your company. So what I do is I will review your policies, procedures, job description, handbooks, legal documentation, any type of HR documents that you do have on in hand. And then from there, I will develop a summary for the business owner or general manager, whoever I'm working with, and then they can decide if they'd like to move forward with my services, because that summary will provide areas of where they really need to focus and get some updating in.
Okay. So I guess that's kind of like falls in the range of like an HR audit. That's
Correct.
basically what that is. Okay. And I would imagine when you do that, you're probably coming back with like, hey, here is a higher risk thing. Here's a nice to have, but here's a higher risk thing that it just like is shouting out to you. This is a potential problem here. Do you help business owners kind of think through that and process that to make sure that they're focusing on the right things?
Yeah, risk mitigation, absolutely. So
Yeah.
when it comes like to the employment laws, like those are non-negotiables, right? Those have to be followed. All of the employment laws, whether again it's federal, state, local, your internal policies, whether it's your uniforms or hair, things like that, whatever. That's not something we need to focus on. But if you've got a handbook from like 10 years ago and you're missing half the federal employment laws that are supposed to be in there, that would definitely be like, hey, this is an area that we need to really focus on it to reduce your risk of legal, ramifications.
Okay, good stuff. Well, so I mean, this has been great. Are there any other thoughts, tips, suggestions you would have for folks in terms of this? Maybe something we haven't talked about?
Um, Honestly, it's really important that you guys just reach out and, I'm available to provide you with any type of services. If you're a smaller company, I can help you again update all of that information. And I can be reached at via my website, hrccservices.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, my email, contact at HRCC Services. I would love to help everybody get their company up to par.
Yeah, for sure. And I would highly recommend that. So Sandra, thanks again for coming on to the show and again just sharing those best practices which are intended to help us stay out of hot water.
Yes, absolutely.
And for those of you that are watching and listening, again, hope this was valuable. I know from my perspective, it's really, really hard to stay on top of all this stuff. I've got, just like you, I've got a full-time job and I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about all day long. And so it's really good to have someone who is thinking about HR and compliance and things like that all day long, like Sandra. Because it's really just impossible to stay on top of everything. And not only that, things do change, right? New laws happen, new regulations are being put out there. I know different states do different things. California's got their own rules. Texas has their own rules, right? There's what do you call them? Work for hire states. There's other states that don't do it that way. I mean, there's just so many details to keep track of. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I hope that you take advantage of this and reach out to Sandra, to get some counseling and guidance and make sure that you are doing what you need to do to stay out of hot water. So thanks again for watching, and we will see you again next time.